Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tactical Startup. On this week's episode, I am happy and pleased to get to interview Carolyn Elefant. In 2002, she created the blog myshingle.com, the longest running blog on solo and small law firm practice and responsible for helping thousands of lawyers launch their own firms. Dubbed the patron saint of solo and small firms, Carolyn writes and speaks on topics including starting a modern law firm in the digital age, how small law firms can leverage technology to compete with large firms, the need for regulatory and ethics reform to ensure the sustainability of small law firm practice, and the role of women-owned law firms in achieving gender equality in the legal profession. I'm so excited to have her on. Let's get started, shall we? You're listening to Tactical Startup, a podcast dedicated to building amazing businesses. I'm your host, Taylor Darcy. In this podcast, we explore ways to innovate, improve, and level up your business through sales, marketing, automation, and business planning. Successful businesses pivot when times are bad and stay the course when times are good. We will have guests from different walks of life to help you see that success is not only possible, but even probable, no matter when or where you start. Through hard work and strategic planning, you can have the entrepreneurial life you've always dreamed. Tune in weekly to level up your business. Carolyn, thank you so much for joining me. How are you today?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Just for the listeners, I typically film these throughout the week, but this week it's Thursday, which happens to be my favorite day of the week. And I know that's funny because you're like, but what about Friday? Well, for Friday, for me, is if my favorite day of the week is Thursday because I can look forward to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, as opposed to Friday. All you're looking forward to is the weekend. So I love Thursdays, and so when they come around, I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for joining me and agreeing to be a guest on the podcast. I sincerely appreciate it. You've been doing this for a while now, 20 years.
Yes, a very long time. I've been practicing law for longer than that. That's really about how long I've been blogging about
Wow.
practicing law and starting.
That's impressive. I mean, things come and go, and you're over here kicking it, like doing awesome with your, between your law practice and your My Shingle. So I wanted to have you on, not only to get to know you better, but also because I feel like given your vast knowledge and experience that you could share a lot of wisdom with my listeners. Let's just start with the basic stuff. If someone's starting a business or a law firm or whatever, what would be your first thing out of the gate that you would recommend doing at this point?
I guess the first thing that I think somebody needs to do is figure out how they're going to start making money out of the gate, or figure out what their model is. So the business they're going to focus on, the clients they're going to target, because that'll just make things easier down the road. And also having sort of a big idea in the background for what venture you're going to pursue, whether it's a small business or a law firm, just having an idea of what your vision is for the business that you're going to build and create.
Yeah, I think that seems to be a common thread among people that I have on here, that they talk about, and I think it's worth continuing to talk about, because I'm in a lot of circles with entrepreneurs, and one of the problems that they have is they jump without looking, and they're great for the gusto, but they're not so good for the planning. It's why this podcast became a thing. Was to help businesses not just start, but to actually be successful. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and I think this is so important in today's world, is gender equality in the legal profession. Let's talk some more about that, because I think it's important that we talk about that not only in the legal profession, but in business entrepreneur world as well. There's a lot to unpack, so I don't necessarily think we could address everything in that one. But what are some things that you see that we can do to make it more equal in entrepreneur world and the legal field?
So I don't know as much about the about larger entrepreneurial entities. I think a lot of the focus in the legal profession on gender inequality goes to the composition of large law firms, and I guess the same is true for very, very large companies. If you think of the very rich or the very wealthy people who are the head of companies like Amazon, or you think Tesla and Google, they generally tend to be men. And I'm not sure there's that much that can be changed within those companies. I think that I really see, I mean, for me, the idea of starting or owning is really very mission driven, in that I think it's a way of starting different companies that may advance diversity or gender equality in a way that a large organization can't necessarily do. And so you can
Right.
start these new entities and create these new models that are maybe more accommodating to parents, or maybe more welcoming to diverse populations. So I see encouragement of ownership by lots of different races and genders to really be the way to diversify the profession, and not just diversify, but also create innovation and new models that will embrace different people moving forward.
Right.
So my focus is really more on starting the new rather than figuring out what you can do within organizations, because I think in those situations, you're, at the end of the day, you're just very limited,
Right.
starting out from what somebody else created.
Yeah, and I not only do I completely agree with that, that was actually why I started my own law practice, was because I didn't want. I call it the good old boy network, right? Like where it's predominantly men, and there's women and minorities have very little say in what happens. In fact, I know in the legal profession, women are the most underrepresented in the partnership tracks of any of the law firms, and it's really quite sad because there's so much opportunity there, that I think that they're missing out on, right? Like, because we've been stuck in this mindset that men are whatever, and that's not accurate, but that's what it's depicted as. In fact, we can kind of thank. You ever seen the movie Legally Blonde?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Legally Blonde was one of the is a movie that has encouraged women in law significantly. In fact, there was a dramatic uptick in women in law for that reason after Legally Blonde aired, much like there was after Top Gun for people in the military. So, I think, that's worth exploring more, right? Like we need to see women in positions in movies and television, however inaccurate their depictions of the legal profession, but at least giving people the idea of doing things, right? And we should support programs of ways of encouraging, women and minorities and LGBTQ plus, all of those types of people we need in the legal industry, right? We need more. We need more people that are going to be able to contribute to the legal practice or the legal field in a positive and meaningful way, and avoid the like I said, the good old boy network essentially. Um,
Yeah.
so, as far as like vision, what made you decide to start your own law practice?
So I started my practice. It's actually interesting. I had been working at a firm, and it was at a time of there. It was a recessionary period. The firm wasn't doing very well. I was actually the only woman who was working there, and I had just gotten married, and so I guess I looked like the best candidate to let go or be told I wasn't on partnership track. So I'd always thought about starting a firm in the back of my mind. And I decided, no time like the present. I didn't have
Right.
kids yet. And so I decided to just go for it. I'd also been working in the energy field, which didn't allow me a lot of many opportunities for litigation. And I thought if I started a firm, I could do court appointed work, take on other cases, and get more courtroom time. So it was exciting for those reasons. But I mean, my only vision was that I would be able to compete against the firm I was leaving and charge lower rates. And that's not necessarily the best vision to start a firm with.
Right.
And I wasn't even fully committed to the idea, to be honest. I just didn't want to have a gap. I wanted to do all those things that I mentioned, but at the same time, I just didn't want to have a gap on my resume. So I figured I could go out and get more litigation experience and handle more cases, and then maybe go back to working at a firm or working for somebody else. So I didn't really have a long-term vision. It was more focused on my own individual development. But once
Yeah.
I started and got out there, and I realized there was this whole exciting world where you could create something when you were in charge, it just completely changed my perspective. And that's why I always say to people who are thinking about starting but who are reluctant to do it, that just, you know, you've got to take the plunge, because when you're
Right.
out there, the world looks so different from when you're inside. And it doesn't matter how many clients you have or how great your firm is to you or how much responsibility you have in there. It still is completely different once you're out doing it yourself. And so that kind of changed my vision. But yeah, starting out, I had no vision. I so admire the younger generation of people I see today who are starting, because
Right.
these people are these young men and women who are graduating, who know they want to start something, they want to scale something, they want to build something, they want to be the, preeminent immigration firm, or they want to be the most the criminal defense firm that wins the most cases, or people have these much
Right.
broader goals than I ever did. But it was also such a different time back then, and you
Yeah.
didn't have access, at least I didn't have access to a lot of other role models who were men or women who owned their own firms. The people who I did know who owned their own firms were probably not the best, probably not the best role models. So
Yeah. I think that it's interesting that you talked about being able to compete with your previous law firm, and how like I couldn't. One of the things that I pride myself on is using technology. A lot of old school law firms are still, I mean, there's nothing wrong with pen and paper, but they shun technology for the sake of oh, that's how I've always done it, right? And I mean, in general, the legal profession is very resistant to change. And so there's a lot of technological issues that go with that, because you'll get a big firm that, they're still doing everything by hand. And it's like, okay, well, if I can do things better, faster, and more efficient as a solo, then I can do what a big firm can do without the big firm crazy, right? Like without the bureaucracy. And that's really what at least that's what I heard. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like you can make changes significantly faster if something's working as a solo or as a base level entrepreneur than IBM and Google and some of these bigger, or in our cases, bigger law firms that, yeah, they might have more resources in some respects, but they can't capitalize on things quite the same way we can. I think that's interesting. So,
yeah, now of course back then, the technology, my technology hacks were, I remember signing up to teach an adjunct class at a paralegal studies program so
mhm.
that I could get access to academic Lexis, because Lexis cost like $600 a month. And this was like in the
Yeah,
mid 90s. That's like $1,000 just for your research service. So,
right.
that was what I did to compete on that front. I think I got email in 1995, but the problem was nobody else was using email. So it didn't really matter. So
Oh
the
my.
tech scene has really been something that has changed everything. And I mean, I almost remember the night that I was able to go online and actually, download copies of the Administrative Procedure Act instead of having to drive out to the library, the law library at midnight, and use the reporters there. So,
Right.
I mean, it was really, it was really the dark days back then.
Well, and you're completely right. They just barely got e-filing. I mean, for crying out loud, one of the easiest things in the entire world, and
I
they just
know.
barely got it in some, and some still don't have it in some jurisdictions. It
Yes,
blows
that's true.
it
In
blows my
Maryland,
mind. They're
I
either
know.
faxing still. I hear that all the time, which blows my mind, or it's still file in person. And I'm like,
Oh
how?
man.
How? Like you have to hire a messenger service literally to, if you're out of the area, to go, they print it and sign and da 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 and send it in. So it's comical in my opinion. So what specific areas of law do you practice these days?
So right now, I handle a whole variety of energy cases. I've worked with all kinds of emerging renewable energy development companies. So I've done everything from ocean energy and offshore wind to solar, not really rooftop solar, but small utility scale solar projects, a little bit of storage. And I work on with those companies on things like siting and power purchase agreements with customers or with utilities, regulatory issues, things like that. Sometimes bigger picture issues like government funding or grants. And then I also work with landowners who are impacted by gas pipeline infrastructure, and so that encompasses issues from eminent domain to appellate work in federal courts, work at a regulatory agency. So it's very niche practice, but as with most niche practices, it requires a lot of different competencies.
Right.
And more recently, I've been looking to branch out into sort of, I guess, what I would call a more normal practice area. I've been looking at things like, creating nonprofits for green and environmental justice and sustainable communities, because a lot of my clients have nonprofits or I've served on their nonprofit boards, but
Right.
I'd like to be able to, maybe help them form nonprofits to be able to take advantage of some of the new changes in the law that are going to make it easier for environmental justice communities to be able to impact policy. So I'm kind of exploring those things.
Nice. Nice. Lots of variety there. I think
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite parts about practice is the variety that which we can work, have different areas. Does the energy is maritime law, if it's based in the ocean, does that apply at all? I'm
So
curious.
it actually, so it does, and it's been a while since I've done offshore wind work, but a
Yeah.
lot of the offshore wind facilities are monitored sort of or regulated in the same way as offshore oil drilling, and so I mean, and also, so there are some maritime rules that apply to different workers, and then there's also Jones Act issues that have to do with the kinds of ships that you use to bring the supplies out to these sites. So I never had gotten into a lot of detail on that for clients, but those issues definitely do come up.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I can see a lot of areas that your practice areas intersect with each other,
Right.
or at least that there's lots of different practice areas that intersect. I should say that would be the more accurate version of it. Let's move back a little bit to like starting your own business. Besides having a good vision and having a good plan, what are some things that you would say I would love to do that again better? What are those types of things?
I think, let's see. I mean, I think I would like to be a little more organized starting out, maybe documenting the systems as I was implementing them instead of, recreating them many, many times before I decided to actually document them. Some things I feel like I did do right from the start. I knew there were like little administrative things that I never liked doing, and I always knew that there were bottlenecks to getting work done. So even as soon as I started, I hired, the first summer I was working, I hired a college student. I've hired law students. I've had a virtual assistant for, it must be like almost 16 years now. I've never met her. And so that's something that I did early on. And that's something that I see many people not doing. And it just makes your life so much easier to have those tasks that you don't enjoy doing just taken off your plate. I think I would have also maybe focused more on figuring out ways to delegate things that I didn't enjoy or just getting rid of them from the start. I know that there are cases I took at the beginning just to generate income, and they were so horrible and they brought me down so much that I probably was losing money in the long run because I was so stressed about them, hated them so much, procrastinated so much, that if I had just turned them down in the beginning and focused on going after getting the work that I really wanted to do, I would have been much better off. So that would be the second piece of advice, is to just always keep laser focused on what your strengths are and the things that you enjoy doing, because you can figure out ways to get rid of the rest of the stuff very quickly and much more
Right.
quickly than you would ever think.
Oh my gosh. Like you are not alone. I did the exact same thing. Like you take anything you can get first coming in the door and it makes you miserable every time. Like
I know.
legit. Like I did that too. You were definitely not alone. I think almost every attorney that starts out like that, right? Like because we're like
Yes.
we need to pay the bills. And there's, our creditors don't care whether we're, bringing in stuff or not, but it literally makes you miserable. And I was too. So some of the best money is when you say no, right?
Exactly.
Oh, every time I say
Sums it
no to
up.
something, I'm happy that I said no because that gives me an opportunity to say yes to the things that I actually like. And
Hmm.
I'm better at it. That's the other part is I'm much happier. I'm better at the things that I like. And I'm a better everything when I'm doing things that I like rather than just taking it, not just for the money, but to survive, right?
Hmm.
So I think that's a very valid point is, laser focus on what you want, and just focus on that and say no to what you don't want. So delegation, how you said you have a virtual assistant now. Have you used paralegals in the past, and where do you go to get these people? Because that's one of the things I struggle with. People are always saying delegate. Yeah, except for to who? Because I've tried and I get such terrible results, that I don't know how to get someone that will be the standard, that I'm not looking for perfection, but they say 80%, right? You should be 80% as good as you. Well, I've been getting like maybe 30 to 50%. So how do you get people that you keep?
So that's a good question. I mean, some of it is really just luck or weird word of mouth. I mean, as you can imagine, finding a paralegal in the energy industry is almost impossible.
Yeah.
And I once found somebody very good who was the mom of a woman who I knew from Facebook, whose husband had started a firm, and I once met with him. It was like this weird connection. She did an amazing job, though, but it was really just a one-off project. I actually don't use a lot of paralegals for that reason because many of them it's really difficult to find a paralegal who's trained on some of the regulatory issues.
Right.
With my assistant, again, it was a referral from an attorney who has since it's not funny since been disbarred,
Oh,
but she this was again like 15 is at
right.
least 15 years ago, and she just turned out to work we just had very similar work patterns. She's proactive, but she's not, bossy,
Right.
and we just again it was just a lucky situation. I've had mixed results. I know there are some paralegal companies that I've asked about but never, had the need to really bring somebody on. And I know that, there are a lot of different platforms where you can get people, which is a blessing and a curse because I mean the good part is there's, again, back then everything was sort of word of mouth. I think
Right.
also I had hired some paralegals or trial support people through actually like through a placement agency, like a Robert Half kind of agency,
Right.
that used to interview them. Now you have, a lot of online platforms and you have more candidates, but it also, I think the quality in some respects has deteriorated. So I don't really have a good answer. I think if you can get I think a personal referral is generally best because even though that person may not have worked well with the person who's referring them, at least you can ask questions and get a sense of, what kind of work the person's going to do or, give you a heads up on what their strengths or weaknesses may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know there are also people who, sometimes when I hire somebody, I try to give them a small assignment first. And then if it works out, give them more work. Sometimes that works out, but otherwise I think it's, at least for me, it's always been a lot of trial and error. I wish I had a good system for always, hiring the right paralegal. I see all kinds of different hacks. Some people will say have them fill out like this 50-page questionnaire or read this email correctly, and I don't know if a really qualified candidate is even going to take the time to respond to something like that. So I don't know if that's the way to do it either, but I think you know the trial and error, definitely interviewing people. I think a lot of times because things are done online, people sometimes skip the interview, don't ask a lot of questions. That can be helpful too to get the right person.
Mm.
But it's very challenging. And then I think the one place where I do tend to get good results is I feel like I'm very detailed in the types of instructions that I give to people, and so that will usually ensure that the results that come back are close enough to what I want.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Have you written down it's a lot of people refer to it as what's called a vivid vision. Like have you ever heard of that at all?
No, I like it though. It's
Okay.
great alliteration.
Yeah. Cameron Harold, who started, I think it's 1-800 Got Junk. He was a CEO. He wrote a book called Vivid Vision, and it talks about, rather than a mission statement, that you sit down and you write out what your ideal law firm would look like, or company, and I mean, detailed, explicit, like very, very clear on what it is. Like, you sit down and, like he says, go somewhere outside of the office, go to the beach, go to your favorite place, go to the place that's as creative as possible for you, and then just start writing, right? What it is that you would like your life to be like, in the context of your business, whatever that may be. And then one of the methods that I've heard of, and this is all stuff that I'm working on. It's so much, I've got so much to do, is to not only do the vivid vision, but then when you're hiring, you take that vivid vision and you make sure that the person that you're hiring can help you fulfill that vivid vision. Because skills can be taught, but if someone thinks, and I say this, if someone thinks you're crazy for having a vivid vision, right? Or if they're just not the person that wants to have a vivid vision, then you already automatically know they're not going to be a good fit. Because most people leave jobs not because it's a bad job, it's because of bad bosses, it's because of bad management, right? Or they do a poor job because of bad bosses or bad management. I'm not suggesting that's true of you. I'm just saying in general, that's the most common reason. And so by helping them see that they're part of this vivid vision, right, then you get someone that's copacetic with your values, your dream, your goal. And the skills can be taught, right? Like, you can teach someone how to do something so that you never have to do it again. But the vision, that one is harder to come by because people aren't always on the same board with that. Anyway, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. I've been going through it among all the others. Like I said, I have so many things to do. It's crazy. I need to work on my vivid vision myself. But I think it's a great tool to begin because you can really visualize what it is that you hope to achieve. There was I follow Man Bialik. She has a podcast called Breakdown. And she had a guy on there named Timber Hawkeye. That's a great name. And he said, if you never identify what success is, how do you know when you've reached it? Right?
Makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting. And so I think that's really what the vivid vision is about. How do you know that you've gotten to your vivid vision if you don't put it out there and make it happen? So,
Yeah.
um,
No, that sounds like a great idea. I can check that out.
yeah, I mean, it's a super short book. Like, I mean, it's not, if you sat down and didn't have any interruptions with my 4, almost 5 little ones, I have more interruptions than I know what to do with. You could probably get it read in the night. Like, a few hours would be all you need. So what are your favorite technology hacks? What are the things that you use to make your life better?
So I'm always playing around with different things. I like the I love Calendly. I think that's one of my favorites. My challenge has always been, you know, everybody calendars, but you actually still have to enter the information into your
Yeah.
calendar for it to be there somehow. And so Calendly forces you to do that with, setting meetings, scheduling things with people, just making sure everything gets on the calendar. So I'd say that has to be one of my favorites. Uh, and I guess some of the others, oh gosh, I mean, I know I've written blog posts about like my favorite technologies. Loom, I'm really enjoying Loom, which is you can just video record from your screen, and it's a good way to provide feedback, explain your changes. If you're editing a document, you can explain it to people. You can highlight different parts of a website. So sometimes I'll use it if I have a website where I want to show a client, which buttons to click on. You can just record something quickly, very easy to use, looks really good. You can have the visual part of it too. And then I've been using for editing, it's, I guess, a new tool called Brief Catch, which was developed by Ross Guberman.
Hmm.
And it's just what it does is, it checks the grammar and the word usage of your of your drafts, but it gives suggestion. It doesn't just tell you what to put in there. It gives suggestions and explains why it's giving particular suggestions. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it will draw examples from like a Supreme Court justice opinion, showing how Justice Breyer used the term instead of rather, or something, rather instead of instead.
Hmm.
So it makes the editing process really engaging.
Right.
And I hate proofreading. I mean, when I can delegate that, I do that, but I can't
Yeah.
always do that. Sometimes you have to make sure that the draft actually makes sense before you can even give it off for proofreading. So it just makes the editing process really engaging. And any tool that kind of can make me sort of sit back and do something differently, or make me do something differently, those are the kinds of tools that I really like or would recommend. So those are three that I've been really enjoying lately.
Well, that's nice. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the brief? You said it was brief catch. Is that what it
Brief
was?
catch. Yeah.
Brief catch. Okay, I'll have to look into that. That sounds interesting. I use Grammarly.
Hmm.
It's okay. It's not legal specific, and so it tends to take out some words that you don't want to take out, and so you have to be real particular on it.
Yes.
But I mean, it catches the majority of your grammar, right? Like I'm not perfect, and I need a second set of eyes, but I don't have a second set of eyes to work with, so I work with what I've got. And then I also use Perfect It Pro.
Mhm.
That one's really good for finding like the really dumb mistakes, like the pagination being wrong or the headings being
Oh.
one capitalized incorrectly and the other one not. Or like for instance, when when you define a term and then you forget to use that defined term later on in the document, it finds those
Oh.
types of mistakes.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's
Oh.
really quite good at that. So I use Grammarly for grammar, use Word Perfect It Pro for those types of mistakes, and then I use WordRake to make things a little more condensed, a
Mhm.
little less verbose, which I have a notoriously bad habit about doing. I always find it funny that the word verbose is a verbose word. And so that, I mean, it is. It is. But so, yeah, those are my three that I like to use technology wise. But one thing that I've found that really helps, at least in legal writing, is definitely one thing is to write what you're going to write and then leave it alone for a little while and then come back to it, and build that into your process, because I found when you have a new set of untired eyes, because when you've stared at a document for the last hour or two and you look at it again and you're like, I don't know what I said. It made sense when I wrote it, but it doesn't make sense today.
Right.
So that's one of my little, I don't say cheats, but things that I do that help me write better. Um, so one thing I did want to talk about, you have filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes, it does.
Okay. And then and with that, did they listen? Was what did
So,
what you wanted to have happen happen?
so it was an amicus brief that I worked on. I co-counseled with a Supreme Court expert who was amazing. And it just, so much work goes into such a small brief. There were multiple parties in the case on both sides. There probably were like 50 amici. So I guess our big victory, if you will, was that when the opposing party, the main party, filed their brief, ours was the only amicus that they responded to in like one sentence, or that they mentioned. So that was kind of a big deal. But ultimately, the court didn't look at really any of the amicus briefs in the ultimate decision. It, instead of focusing on it focused more on these narrow issues of statutory interpretation rather than looking at the broader policy issues. Even though I think the reason that the court heard the case, one of the reasons the court took the case to begin with, was because the petitioners had made such a big issue of the policy. They were arguing that if this interpretation were upheld, that pipelines would never get built ever again, and there'd be this whole energy crisis. There'd be like a Chinese wall between the east and west of the country. You couldn't get it. Was
Oh my.
that was the policy argument. So we didn't. My clients, we didn't agree with the decision itself, but ultimately, the pipeline wound up being canceled for other reasons, independent of the Supreme Court case. Only a pipeline can actually litigate the Supreme Court case, bring the cost of that, and then decide that it doesn't want to actually build the project. but so things worked out well for the client in the end, just not as a result of that particular case.
Interesting. Wow. Because, and I say this out, there's not very many people in the legal profession that have drafted anything for the Supreme Court. So that's quite impressive that you were able to get that. And even I don't want to say inadvertently, that's not the right word. Even the way that you did have it happen, that it worked out in your client's favor.
Yes, that was always nice.
Yeah. Because that doesn't happen often. Let's just say that.
No, oh boy, I know that.
It can go either way. It really can. Like, TV shows are terrible about what, the one side always wins or whatever, and you're like, really? No.
Yeah, I know.
As often. So, as far as when you fast forward and you've started your law practice, you've been doing it for, let's see, you did your blogging, you started in 2002, so you've been doing that for 20 years. When did you start practicing law?
Oh, I graduated from law school in 1988. I worked for the government and for some big and small boutique firms for a total of 5 years before I started my firm. So I guess I've had my own firm for must be like 27 or 28 years now, or a long time.
Okay, very cool. And still a fan of practicing law?
There are definitely things I like about the law, but I never thought that people were meant to have lifelong careers.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least to do everything, to do the same thing for that much time. So I still enjoy the practice of law, but I'm also ready to explore different opportunities. I just don't know what they are yet. But law is also the kind of thing that I think isn't difficult to get back into if you leave it. And
Right.
if you leave for a while and then come back, it's just a matter of doing the research to catch up on what the cases are and whatever new technology has been emerged.
Yeah. And I know people do come and go, and actually a lot of people leave and never come back. And
That's true.
and I think it depends on the person, and I just think it depends on the practice area. I think there's so much of it that people get, they get tied up in law school with they go into law school thinking one way, they get into law school thinking a different way, and then they get out and it's like, wow, this is not necessarily what I thought it was going to be. And so now they have to adjust their sails accordingly, right? And I think
Right.
I think it's important to acknowledge that, everybody can contribute in a way that is meaningful for them. And if it's for a year or 2 years, great. If it's not, then that's up to them. And honestly, people that have, didn't pass the bar, and there's some definite positives to that as well, right? Like there's,
Yes.
so I don't think anybody that, if anybody's listening that hasn't taken the bar or planning on taking the bar, passing is not a prerequisite for being a good person or doing the things that you love in your life. There's lots of ways to contribute successfully, regardless. I wanted to kind of move on. You are on TikTok. Tell me about that. As an attorney, how is that working for you?
So, as with most of the social media I engage, it usually doesn't have much success because my audience tends to, or my target clients tend to read my newsletter, and that's most of my old school things. But it is so fascinating to watch other attorneys on TikTok that have practice areas that connect with other TikTok users, small business attorneys who are connecting with influencers, or just immigration attorneys who are connecting with people who are immigrants who are scrolling through TikTok.
Right.
And you see, it was so fascinating to be on there during the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard trial because, trial lawyers were sharing their perspective of what was happening in the courtroom. And, attorneys were, fielding questions from other people who were watching the trial. And it's really interesting because some of the questions, really law in some ways is very much foreign to people who don't get caught up in the legal system. I mean, some of the questions that people ask that seemed so basic to me were, really just things that people don't know because they would have no reason to know them. So I think it's a great medium, and just looking at the ways that people are able to present information, because it has to be done very succinctly, has to be done in an entertaining way. You've got to capture people's attention and make your point. So, I mean, I think a lot of these social media tools are also very helpful to, just as a lawyer, to kind of exercise your mind in different ways, to approach different problems. But I did hit a thousand users, so I use it very experimentally for a lot of different things. I post,
Right.
in contrast to other social media platforms that I use, I actually I once in a while post about more personal things on TikTok. I've, posted pictures of my dog, which I would, never post on, I guess, I mean, once in a while, even in my law firm newsletter, I will have a picture of the dog. So,
Yeah.
but it's such an interesting platform. And what you've said about the attention span is so true, because it is addictive. You get on there and you look for like 10, 15 seconds, and if it doesn't catch your attention, on to the next feed.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things I struggle with, but I think we could all take a lesson from TikTok and the Department of, especially as attorneys, of get to the point, right? Like that's
Yes.
because we have. I always find it funny that they call them briefs and they're 40 pages long, right?
Right,
Or
right.
however long they're supposed to be, right? Like depending on the area. But I think that's interesting because with TikTok and the TikTok generation and whatnot, people's attention spans have gone down to the point where if you're not getting their attention quickly, you're losing it, right? And that's why, like for instance, people that are watching this, they may not appreciate it, but your visual acuity is such that if you don't see a changing image every so often, your brain automatically starts tuning out. And I'm about to I read a video. I read a book on making videos for YouTube because this is heavily on you. That's where I do most of my videos. And the main point of the video, and I'm about to ruin it for you, in almost any movie and almost every TV show, if you watch the scenes change and you're paying attention, they're almost always no more than 10 seconds. So you can start counting from the beginning of the scene change to the next scene, and it'll be approximately 10 seconds. But your brain fills in the difference. And so you're able to comprehend more than you think you are, even though like average people, you're like, well, this is just, like it's bugging me. Well, no, it's keeping your interest because the movies have shown that if they don't do that, that they're not going to keep your interest for very long if you just talk into a screen for a long period of time. And I think that's an interesting way I think that's why TikTok's been so successful, is because they address that short attention span that we all have, and they do it in a fun and engaging way for the most part. So yeah, I'm on TikTok, and plenty of people have seen my likes, but you haven't seen a video of mine yet that I've done.
Yeah.
I've shared some videos, but it's not my thing really. I'm not really good at that. So what's next for you? What are your plans? I know you're talking about different things, but where are you headed?
So right now I'm doing a relaunch or a facelift of my blog. It's due for sort of a modernization, and what I'm trying to do is pull together a lot of the content. Because I have so much content, I've been reaching out to different legal technology companies to do some partnerships with them or programs with them. And I'm hoping to do a few more programs through my site. But otherwise, I mean, honestly, I'm not sure. I'd been hoping that this year that I would take a sabbatical and just take a little time off and figure out what I want to do next, and have a case that got a little bit off the rails that I haven't been able to do that with yet. But I mean, I feel like that's really the next thing. I mean, I've really been working straight for all that time. When
Right.
my daughters were born, I mean, I cut my hours, but I was always working, so I never really took, even like, I think there was one period I did take 3 weeks off early in my practice, I spent 3 weeks or 4 weeks working in a national park, but that was like a
Okay.
long time ago. So I feel like I need another break to kind of refocus and figure out like really what it is that I want to do next, because I don't know.
Okay. And you know what?
Mm,
One of the beautiful parts about life is you don't have to know, right?
yes.
Like legit, like people, get trapped into thinking that, they have to do certain things a certain way. And I think as attorneys, we're notorious for this. I knew a lot of people that went to law school just because mommy and daddy wanted them to go to law school, or they went to law school because mommy and daddy were lawyers. And so they thought they had to. And I think
Right.
that there's a lot to be, explored. And, my kids, I tell them, I said, I don't care what you do. Like, you want to be an attorney. You want to you want to work at McDonald's, work at McDonald's. The only thing that I want is you to be the best at whatever it is that you be, right? You be the best McDonald's worker. You be the best trash taker. I don't care. Like, literally, you do your job with honor and commitment, and do what you want to do with good. I'm happy. Like, I'm happy for you. Like, whatever that is. You want to be an artist? Be an artist. Just know that you might be a starving artist. And sometimes you're a starving attorney. Let's just face it.
Mm.
But, and getting hung up on expectations is something that we can avoid. Before we go, any last minute bits of wisdom that you would share with someone that's getting started with their business, or ways to grow a business? Because I know there's lots of opportunity out there.
Yeah, so I mean, I think getting started, I mean, as I look back, I mean, I think that it's there's a lot to be said about, creating systems and always being strategic, looking for opportunities to grow. I mean, that's all business stuff that is, readily accessible online. But I think the other thing that you don't want to lose sight of, that's very easy to do, is just like the pleasure and enjoyment. It really should be fun. It shouldn't be hard. You should feel like you want to wake up and get to work like on 99% of your days. And I think that if when you stop having fun is when you need to start looking to see if maybe there's something else you should be doing. So I would just not forget about something as simple as that.
Wow, yeah, that is so very important. But it's a struggle, right? Like, especially when you wear all the hats, there are
Yes.
certain things that you just have to kind of suck it up and do it, whether you like it or not. And then hopefully you get to the point where you can put other people in charge of those things, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think
But I
that's
mean,
key.
even sometimes when you do that, I mean, I remember times when my daughters were babies and when I was keeping one of them quiet and doing a phone call and, getting a brief out. And it was still exhilarating. I mean, it was frenetic and it was a little stressful, but it was exhilarating too, to just be able to know that you could do all that stuff. So it's still, and again, like you said, there's going to be days when it just when it's not fun, when it does suck. I mean, otherwise you'd be like a Stepford lawyer or something if you were just
Yeah,
happy and smiling all the time, like I'm a happy idiot. but
yeah,
um, but I think when you have too many days where it's not fun or where it's forced, or where you're just going through the motions, I think that's time to maybe just even see if you can take a break and do something different. Maybe it's just a matter of, going to a new conference, going to a lecture on something, learning something new, just to like put a little bit of life back into it.
yeah, yeah. I think that's very valid. I couldn't agree more. Um, and so before we go, I've got three questions. I like to ask different questions for fun, just for my listeners to get to know you better, and they're just fun. Why not? So the three questions are, I'll just read them one at a time so you can answer them. What is something you hate but wished you loved?
Oh gosh, I think there's probably a lot of things like that. I think one of the things I hate, well, I will say I hate Disneyland and Disney World. I just don't like things like that, and I see people going on those trips. I wish I enjoyed that more. And then I guess the other thing I really hate is mayonnaise. But again, on TikTok, I see all these people making these dishes with mayonnaise that look delicious, but I won't try them because I know I hate mayonnaise. So I wish I
Hmm.
I wish I liked it so I could encourage myself to try it.
Do you like Miracle Whip instead, or you just don't like that
I
type
don't
of
I
candy?
don't like those creamy,
Oh,
slimy.
interesting. That's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Everybody's different.
Secret.
There's
I know. I don't fault people who do like mayonnaise. I've worked in fast food. I did a lot of extra mayo orders. It was fine.
okay. So what do you put on your sandwiches, or do you even eat
Uh,
sandwiches?
don't eat sandwiches that much, but when I do, it's like mustard or hot peppers, maybe ketchup if it's a burger. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. And wouldn't the world be so boring if we were all the same, right?
That's right.
I
That's
mean,
right.
like if everybody was an attorney, this would be a very crazy world,
Yes.
right? Like we need
Yes.
everybody.
Right.
Um, there's no shortage of awesome, no matter what. All right, next one is if you could look through one person's email without them knowing, whose email would you look through?
Oh, goodness. I would have to say my daughters.
Let's hope she doesn't listen.
Yeah. No, but I mean their stuff is very well protected. And I guess I mean if it were a famous person, I don't think I'd want to look at the Clinton emails. I might want to look at some of the Donald Trump emails. That would be interesting.
Interesting or scary? I don't
Well,
know
yes.
which is that, or both, and probably
Yeah,
both.
yeah. Intriguing.
Yeah, I forgot to answer my okay for
Oh
my
yeah.
food, or what I wish what I
What
hate,
you
but
should like, yeah.
you know I I don't hate it, but I don't. It's not my favorite. I know this is gonna sound funny. I love living in San Diego, but I do not like the beach. Like that is not my thing. Like I can go to the beach and I'm fine with it. So I can't say that I hate it, but it's not something that I love. My wife loves the beach. She would be at the beach all the time. That's just not my thing. I don't like getting sand everywhere. I don't like having sand in places, and it doesn't do anything for me. I like the romantic part of it and taking a walk along the beach,
Mhm.
but that's not. It's like I'm okay without the beach a lot of the time. The other thing is camping. Like my wife loves to go
Oh,
camping, but that is one thing
I,
again I don't hate, but
yeah.
I really don't like camping. I don't like being dirty.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah, or
not
the wet. Yeah.
yeah, it's not my thing. I like showers. I like being
Oh.
clean. It's just not my thing. Um, so as far as email is concerned, I don't really have. I mean, if there was email, it would be interesting to have Abraham Lincoln's email. Like if that were,
Yes.
so I don't know why that just popped in my head, but like if there was email back in that time period, I'm not saying
Mm.
there is for people that are listening. There was no email when
You're gonna
Lincoln.
get complaints.
Just making sure we're clear on that one. I'm not an idiot. If there were email back then, it would be interesting to know what Abraham Lincoln was saying, or George Washington. That would be another one.
Right.
I'd love to know. All right, and last but certainly not least, what makes you feel old?
Oh my gosh. Well, certainly I've been saying how long I've been in practice, like 20, 30, I don't know, 32 years since I graduated from law school, and that makes me feel old. And then I guess just seeing people who are starting law firms who are like 25 or 26 years old. I mean, that's not much younger. I started mine when I was 29, but just hearing people starting firms at that age, that does make me feel a little bit old too. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Mine is when I hear people talking about there was a TikTok recently where someone had a cassette tape and they couldn't figure out how to open it. That made me feel old. Like when they
Yeah.
start talking like 80s music and 70s music and stuff like that, I was like, that's not that long ago. And yet,
Yeah.
like
No,
people,
that's
the pencil in the cassette tape, how to
oh,
unwind it,
right, right. I remember that.
I
Yes, and
remember
the
that. Or making
Walkman.
mixed tapes, you'd wait all day
Right.
for the song on the radio to come on to make a mix, and you'd always cut off the first second or two because you couldn't press record fast enough, because you wouldn't
Right.
recognize it was the original name that tune before it was a name that tune sort of thing.
Yes.
So those are things that make me feel old when people are like, I don't get what's a record or what's an eight track. Even some of the weirder ones are what's a CD. right? Like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, that's that. You should know what a DVD is. It's just a CD.
Uh,
Da, 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 same
yeah.
space. Such is life. So, thank you so much for coming on and joining me. If where can my listeners find you at if they'd like to reach out to you to talk about starting a law firm or business in general, or for legal needs?
So, best place to find me, you can visit my blog, myshingle.com, or they can find me. I'm on Twitter at Carolyn Elefant, and TikTok on the same handle. Also, LinkedIn. I mean, those are kind of the general places, but myshingle.com would get you to my email too. So,
Okay, very cool. Thank you so much. And I sincerely appreciate it. I'm sure my listeners appreciate your time and willingness to come and share your wisdom with them. So thank you. Oops. I realized I've hit the button too quickly, so I apologize.
it's okay.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, this was great. Thank you so much too.
Well, that was Carolyn Elefant, and so full disclosure, we don't know each other that well, but we have some of the same circles that we mix in, and she's also, I follow her on TikTok, and that's how I got to know her, and that's what made me want to reach out and have her on this podcast, was because I felt like she could share some amazing wisdom. So thank you for joining me this week. I look forward to bringing you lots more guests. There's so much more to come. And don't forget to always think tactically. We'll talk to you later. Bye.